This Miata is the product of $25,000 worth of mods, thousands of hours of wrenching, and a lot of frustration. It wasn't easy to get to this point, but today we're gonna go over all the things we've done to this car in over 50 episodes to bring it from a $2,300 Craigslist find into a turbocharged daily driver you could take to the track. Then at the end, we'll decide if it was all worth it or not.
Thanks to Amaze for sponsoring today's video.
I know what you're thinking. What is a jock with 100% authentic bulging muscles doing with Jerry going through a goth phase?
It's not a phase, Nolan. Oh my God.
There's jocks and there's goths, and rarely do they mix. Well, now they do, because Amaze is giving you the chance to win the ultimate 80s muscle car, the 1987 Buick Grand National GNX.
Decked out in all black, my second favorite color after misunderstood gray. Plus, its simply sinister all-black exterior houses a turbo 3.8-liter V6 engine sitting on 16-inch cross-weave wheels.
It's the strength of a muscle car
with the dark, brooding charisma of your favorite supervillain. Hey Nolan, you want to listen to some death metal and scribble in notebooks about our favorite spiked collars?
I'm cool, goth Jerry.
Oh, I feel the pain.
Best of all, every donation supports the ACLU, a nonprofit that fights to defend the rights the Constitution guarantees to all of us. Now that's strength. What are you doing there, goth Jerry?
Bicep curls. This GNX has inspired me. I can be brooding and strong.
So, for your chance to win this 1987 Buick Grand National GNX, taxes and shipping included, go to amaze.com/donutmedia. Oh yeah, make sure you're focused, like you're pinching that muscle. Like you're pinching the bicep, not necessarily a pull. Feel that pinch.
3 years ago, I had just moved to Los Angeles from Ohio. I was living out of an RV and I needed a daily driver, so I bought this 1994 Miata. This car is the C package trim, which means it has a few choice upgrades from the base model, like a Torsen limited slip diff, leather seats, and sweet speakers in the headrests. It had low miles, and I was able to snag it for $2,300, which is a deal you can't find today. It just so happened that we were developing a show which would go on to become Money Pit, and we needed a car to build out. And what's better than a Miata for teaching people how to wrench on cars? It's cheap, parts are cheap, Mazda made 1 million of them, and it's just a great overall project car for beginners. With the production wheels in motion, we needed a plan. From the jump, we knew we wanted to eventually turbocharge the Miata, but we needed to get some basics done before we got to that point. Mainly figuring out what condition the thing was in. Luckily, the car was in a pretty good place already, but it's always good to replace all the fluids and lubrication so we could have a nice, healthy baseline before we started wrenching on the Miata. With the fluids and everything freshened up, it was time for the first modification. One of the first mods anyone does to their cars is wheels and tires, and we're no different. So we took off the old stock stuff and installed NK RPF1s wrapped in Toyo R888 tires. The stock wheels and tires were pretty skinny, so the NKs with the Toyos are a little bit wider, which gives us a huge improvement in terms of grip. Now, the next logical upgrade was suspension. We bought Skunk 2 suspension with adjustable damping, ride height, and preload because it fit the budget and provided all the adjustability that we really needed to make this thing handle well on the track. After that, we installed a steering wheel, which is a great steering wheel which doesn't fly off while I'm driving. So with our steering wheel upgraded, we decided to upgrade the fact that our steering system was leaking by upgrading it to a non-leaking system. I decided to rebuild the power steering rack that's in the Miata, which turned out to be a terrible decision. It was not only no fun at all, but it didn't work, and the leak got 10 times bigger than it originally was. So I ended up having to buy a remanufactured steering rack anyway. But it was time for an alignment. So I went into this episode expecting it to be a little bit tedious because of all the trial and error that we would have to do, and that turned out to be true. It was a long couple days of testing, but it's a good skill to have. It's obviously way easier to just take your car to an alignment shop, but the real point of that episode was if you're a track rat, going to the track often, it's a really good skill to have to be able to do it on your own so you can try to tweak and dial some things in differently while you're at the track without having to leave and go to a shop and pay them to do an alignment. Since the alignment was done, we decided to turn our attention to the engine bay. So we started out with an air intake system. We chose a Racing Beat cold air intake, not really because it was going to make a bunch more power, because it didn't, but the metal looks cooler than the stock intake, and the induction sounds alone honestly make it worth it in my opinion. And if the intake is making cool sounds, then the next logical step is to make the exhaust sound cool. Stock Miatas don't sound amazing, but with this MagnaFlow, we were able to get a bit more growl out of the 1.8 liter engine. It was a little bit of a struggle to fit the new exhaust on, as it kind of always is, but it's always good to have friends like Eddie around to help out. Now, Eddie popped into a bunch of different Money Pit episodes. He was one of the guys that was usually behind the camera and behind the computer editing, making Money Pit a reality. Eddie decided that it would be a great idea to do a flame shooter episode. So Eddie saw some video online where some guy was shooting propane flames out of his exhaust pipe, and much to my chagrin, we ended up doing it. It sort of worked out. It's kind of goofy, slightly dangerous for no good reason, but it did work out. We did shoot some flames, and it made Eddie happy, and I guess at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So since we were done shooting fireballs, we decided to do a real upgrade and upgrade the old clutch in the car. In hindsight, I probably would have chosen a different clutch. It was a 3-puck clutch for a very low power application. I thought it might feel weird or be tough to drive, but it ended up being okay. But again, I probably would have chosen a different one, but it did work out. And that's what matters. So next up was some new headers, which are a pretty simple upgrade, but they are important. This is the first time we took the car to our dyno guy, Richard Gibby, and we wanted to get a baseline horsepower figure. So stock power came in at a whopping 104 horsepower. But after we installed the brand new headers, we made
107.5. We've made about 4 horsepower.
After the headers, we decided to test cheap versus expensive roll bars, which would kind of end up being one of the sketchiest episodes we ever did. Installing the roll bar was kind of time consuming, but not really altogether too difficult, but then everything went a little bit off the rails.
Oh God.
For the record, I knew the forklift was going to tip over. We had a pretty hairy setup. But we got that thing back on its feet and managed to test our roll bar. Dang! It was time to install one of the quickest and easiest upgrades we did, which also meant one of the quickest and easiest episodes we ever shot. It was the installation of the short shifter. It took like 4 hours total, start to finish, to make an episode. That's pretty dang good. So after the shifter was done, it was time to put real racing seats and harnesses in the Miata so we could take it to the track. Brings us to the track day, which was one of the worst track days I've ever been to. It's not totally true, it was just incredibly hot. It was like 105, 110 degrees, which I guess is what you get in the desert. But the Miata overheated all day. It was still on the stock cooling system, but that's just what happened. Overheated all day. I couldn't even finish a full fast lap because I'd have to let the engine cool down about halfway through a lap. It was kind of stupid, but I kind of expected that to happen. And then we knew that we needed to do a pretty big, pretty substantial cooling system upgrade at that point. So, as you might guess, the next thing we did was upgraded the radiator and the cooling system in general. Especially once you start making more power, it becomes really important to make sure that your cooling system can handle the power you're making, keep your engine cool. So I installed a Flying Miata kit, which included a radiator from Koyorad, a coolant rerouting kit, which reroutes the path of the coolant to cool better, and a Spall brushless fan to suck a bunch of air through that new radiator and keep everything nice and cool so we could finally finish a lap at the track. You know what's cooler? Being able to stop. So next up was a big old brake setup. We went with Wilwood's 4-piston brakes and BP10 compound pads. I got this kit from Flying Miata because they sell a bunch of great upgrades for Miatas, and because Wilwood makes awesome brakes, but also because it came with a special purple bracket, and I really, really love purple anodized parts. These brakes have an adjustable proportioning valve, which is convenient when you're tuning your car at the track. This lets you kind of dictate how much braking power goes to the front brakes versus the rear brakes. The install was super time consuming, but a really quality improvement over the stock brakes, even if the pad compound does squeak a little bit under normal driving, but I would say one of my favorite upgrades overall on the car. So the brakes would be the last upgrade before the point of no return. That's when we installed a standalone ECU, which is the point of no return in my mind. The ECU is basically the brain of the car, and if you're putting in an aftermarket computer, that means the Miata is no longer technically street legal. But if we wanted to make more power, there's no two ways about it. We need an aftermarket ECU so we can control all the things. This is a plug-and-play ECU with downloadable tunes, so overall it wasn't a huge headache. We took it back to the dyno where our boy Gibby tuned it, and we ended up making a whopping, and in fact an insane, 112.75 horsepower to the rear wheels. So with that done, it was time to do some more upgrades. So it was time to modify the engine if we wanted to actually start making some power. So the next logical step was to upgrade the intake manifold. So we picked a Skunk 2 intake manifold, which had longer runners than stock, which means a little more airflow and velocity, and it also lets us run a bigger throttle body, which is important when you're gearing up for a turbo. But you got to keep in mind that all of this was happening during a pandemic, and we were having a hard time getting the car parts that we wanted. So while we waited for our turbo parts, we fixed the cracks in the dashboard in the Miata and my S14. We put some nice new bright LED headlights in the Miata. We did some suspension bushings. So as we were doing all those episodes, turbo parts were showing up and they were finally all there and ready to install. So since it was turbo time, we had accumulated our parts. So I took what I could get, and that was a CX Racing turbocharger kit. CX Racing isn't really known for super high quality parts, but they are pretty cheap. So that worked out. It came with a turbocharger, the exhaust manifold, the intercooler and charge piping, blow-off valve, and I think that's about it. So on top of the CX Racing kit, we also had to source some fuel upgrades like a fuel pump and fuel injectors, but got it all done and took it back to the dyno. My boy Richard Gibby spun the rollers, and we made a whopping...
We did it! We made 227 horsepower.
So with the turbo kit all installed, making power, it was time to take the car back to the track. And honestly, this was a day that cost me a lot of sleep thereafter. We went to the track, started making some passes, and started leaking a bunch of oil out of basically every crack and crevice of the engine. But the fact is, I really just didn't notice something pretty obvious, which was a plug on top of the breather cap for the crankcase, which was not letting our crankcase breathe. When you add a turbo, you end up putting more pressure into your crankcase, and that needs somewhere to go. And if you got it capped off, it's only gonna come out all the cracks and crevices of the engine. So after figuring that out and not sleeping forever, it was time to install a proper catch can setup so that our crankcase could actually breathe. And installed that, and the car's been running great ever since. And that brings us to today. So the question is, was it all worth it? Was it worth it to spend $25,000 on this 94 Miata? Well, yeah, I think so. I think the answer is yes. I mean, first off, we over doubled our horsepower. Went from 103 horsepower to a whopping 257, which I gotta tell you, feels fantastic in a tiny car like this. So yeah, I mean, $25,000 is a lot of money, but the fact is you could do it for cheaper. And I think the real takeaway here is that any time spent with your friends in the garage tinkering on a car is gonna be time well spent. So it's always worth it in my opinion. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed Money Pit on the Miata. And if you haven't seen it, why don't you go back and watch all those episodes, all 50 plus. I'll see you guys later.